Thank y'all for being here today. Thank y'all so much.
You're
Hey,
welcome.
Mr. Bowling, how are you? It's good to see you.
I am a man at peace, and I'm happy to be here.
Listen, that's all any of us can ask for.
I hear you.
Thank y'all so much for being here today. My name is Leah Whitehurst Gibson. I am the Executive Director of Virginia Community Voice. And we're so glad that y'all could join and be a part of our Reclaiming Philanthropy event in celebration of Black Philanthropy Month. So grateful for everyone that is with us, and there may be some more that join. We're just gonna kind of have people come in as they come in. So I want to give y'all, for those of you who don't know us well, give y'all a little bit about Virginia Community Voice, who we are and what we do, and a little bit about why we're having this event today. So our mission at Virginia Community Voice is to equip neighbors in historically marginalized communities to realize their vision for their neighborhoods, and then to prepare institutions to respond effectively. And our mission is big. It's a commonwealth where decisions are made more equitably. We know that's a long mission, and we know it's going to take a while. But the way that we fulfill our mission and vision is through two programs. Our RVA Thrives, which is a program that focuses primarily on the Richmond Highway corridor on the south side of Richmond, Virginia, and that program focuses on increasing neighborhood leadership over decisions affecting that corridor, formerly the Jefferson Davis corridor. That name has changed recently, and we have not updated the slide. And so that's really how we kind of we work on the first part of our mission. Monty, you can switch to the next slide. And the second part of our mission, the way that we work on that is through our community voice blueprint, preparing institutions to respond effectively to community voice, because we know that so much of the injustice and inequity in our communities is because institutional leadership does not understand how to listen to the community when they speak. And so either doesn't understand or doesn't want to, right? And so we're working to help institutions understand how to respond effectively to community voice through our community voice blueprint, which is a guide to community engagement that we wrote and that we have created trainings around. And through that community voice blueprint, we also do coaching for institutions to get them to a place where they understand how to respond to the community voice when it comes up. To date, through our community voice blueprint program, we have engaged we've trained almost 300 people from over 100 different organizations. And really our goal through this is to help decision makers understand the tools they need to trust the community and trust their voice, and allow them to be a part of implementing and designing solutions to the problems that we face on a regular basis. And so today, why we are here today is to focus on Black Philanthropy Month and to highlight it. For those of you who didn't know that there was a Black Philanthropy Month, we want you to bring some awareness to it. We want to think about the legacy of Black philanthropy. And we just want to really celebrate. So we always try to have kind of a celebratory moment when we come in, dancing, a little bit of music, connecting with each other, because this is something to celebrate. And so why we're here today is because we want to start to rethink the way that we think about philanthropy. I think a lot of times Black and brown people and people of color in general are left out of the conversation around philanthropy, particularly the Black community. And so we really wanted to have an event to talk about what that looks like. And we have a great panel today, and we're going to have some question and answer, and hopefully have a good time kind of connecting with each other and thinking about that. And so often when you think about a philanthropist and philanthropy, those words bring up kind of memories of the past. So you think about Carnegie and Rockefeller and some of the big names back in the 1920s and 30s and all of that. but we don't really think, and then today we think about like the Gates family or other philanthropic families that have a lot of money that are putting into communities, but often we don't see ourselves or those in our community kind of through that lens, and with those kind of, we don't apply those terms to ourselves or the people in our community. But in honor of this month, we want to have a conversation about reclaiming those narratives around philanthropy and the importance of Black giving. And in the discussion, we're going to hear from community members, nonprofit leaders, and foundation programs officers, and people who are often overlooked as philanthropists. And so we are gonna, just a quick kind of recap. Some of you who were part of our Courageous Fundraising Principles launch last, I guess it was last November or December, or Giving Tuesday, so December, saw this slide because we wanna ground the conversation in the reality of the history of philanthropy in our country. And so traditional philanthropy has been built through extraction of resources, land, life from people of color. And when we don't talk about how wealth has been accumulated, we can ignore how many wealthy philanthropists were complicit in the oppression and the marginalization of people of color. And so, and how we've gotten to this narrative of how traditional philanthropy excludes people of color who have a long legacy of philanthropy, especially in the Black community, and of mutual aid and all of these different ways that we're generous. And so I want to just give you a quick summary of this slide. We're not going to go into all the details of it, but just kind of thinking about starting with colonialization in the 16 and 1700s and how colonists stole land from indigenous people. Plantation owners made vast fortunes because of enslaved Africans and had no labor costs. And then they made even more by selling enslaved people. And then all of this during this period of time where Black and indigenous people were not able to accumulate wealth because that wealth has been stolen for them or built on their backs, and they are not getting a share in that space. And then later experiencing discrimination in the labor market, being able to build businesses, redlining, being able to build wealth through homes, reduce access to capital in Black neighborhoods. All of these things led to the extraction of wealth from the Black community and the building up of wealth primarily in the white community. And it leads to the wealth gaps that we see today. So what's the connection to philanthropy? Modern grant making was founded on large scale donations and a number of individuals and families who made their wealth during the late 19th and early 20th centuries from steel and oil and railroad and telegraph and automobile industries, such as the Carnegies and the Rockefellers and the Fords. And during this time, philanthropy became more formalized and professional. And this is when really it started for that, it was something that like, oh, the federal government has said, okay, this is a real thing. This is something that, that we recognize. Paradoxically, wealthy philanthropists set up foundations to address growing social and environmental harm that they and their families had a hand in creating, which is also a deep problem when you think about traditional philanthropy. And then in the 1900s, there are tax-exempt nonprofits. So then philanthropy started to become, they saw an opportunity for it to become kind of a tax haven where you get tax deductible opportunities and things like that. And so, and then it wasn't in 1969, there was regulated, foundations began to be regulated and then mandating a minimum payout of at least 6%. Now it's 5%, it's gone down. But then when you look at that, only 8 to 9% of that 5% is actually going into communities of color. 92% of CEOs and foundations, 89% of executives on foundation boards, and 78% of nonprofit boards are white. White Americans continue to make decisions about resource allocation and nonprofits source. So we're not going to focus too much more on this particular slide, but we wanted to ground the conversation in kind of the truth of history and how we kind of got here. But most of today is going to be about celebrating Black philanthropy and celebrating wealth built and an investment in the Black community. And so despite all of these realities that I just broke down, if we go to the next slide, we see that, that Black Americans give more as a share of their wealth than white Americans. And we have a long legacy of mutual aid and giving. And that's what has sustained Black communities without the support of traditional philanthropy, because you see only 8 to 9% of traditional philanthropic dollars go into the Black community, into Black organizations that are led by people of color. But we are still giving, we are still supporting our communities. And so then why are we left out of the conversation about philanthropy? Why are we left out of those circles? And when people think about philanthropists, they don't think about us. And I think to understand some of that, we have to think about the definition of philanthropy. So the definition of philanthropy is an active effort to promote human welfare and an act or a gift done or made for a humanitarian purpose. And the other definition is an organization distributing or supporting funds set aside for humanitarian purposes. And I think a lot of times we focus on that last one, just the organizations giving money, and don't think about the other two. And I think those other two, an active effort to promote human welfare, or an act or a gift done or made for humanitarian purposes, is where the Black community kind of lies, because philanthropy often looks different in our communities. And when we think about traditional philanthropy, it's not like we think monetary or an organization, but really for Black people, a lot of times it's time, talent, and treasure, right? So it's all three of those things. It's not just treasure. It's often to offer an effort to support family when we're struggling, to support ourselves. So many, I've been in a situation where I've had family members that need to stay with me when they're struggling. So to make sure that those people don't fall into a place where they're really struggling. And so that happens a lot in the Black community. I think probably every Black person probably knows someone who is supporting people, whether it's family or other community members, in that way. But you don't get a tax break for that, right? And then there are also ways it's supporting our communities, investing in our places of worship, our civic associations. All of these things are time and talent, and we don't always think about that as traditional philanthropy. And so today we want to explore the broader scope of what it means to be philanthropic, in a sense of people making an active effort to promote human welfare, or giving their time, talent for humanitarian purposes. This Black Philanthropy Month, we specifically want to look at ways that the Black community in the US for centuries has been and continues to be philanthropic. This is particularly important to me because I run an organization, and I founded an organization, and we as a nonprofit are trying to fund and do development differently. We're trying to approach how we steward resources more equitably. And as an organization that does community organizing, we want to center fund development efforts that around building relationships. It's relational, it's not transactional. And so for those of you who don't know, we've developed courageous fundraising principles. We have a whole presentation on that. If you'd like to check those out, you can go to our website, but in those principles, we talk about valuing small, large, monetary, and in-kind investments equally. We don't promote people because they give more. And we intend to democratize nonprofit fundraising and challenge traditional ideas of what it means to be a philanthropist. So to us, anyone and everyone has something to offer, and to the fight for racial equity, social justice, and a more thriving Richmond. So with that, we're excited to have a panel discussion about what that looks like in our communities from 3 philanthropists. And so I know y'all didn't come here to just hear me talk, you came to kind of have a larger discussion. And so we are going to, without further ado, introduce, well, I'm gonna say their names and have them introduce themselves and talk a little bit about what they do in the community, and then we'll get into the discussion. And so we have Louise McQueen, who has been in the community, doing work in the community for over 40 years. She has been invested in the work that on the south side of Richmond, and particularly in the Belle Meade community. She's invested in many nonprofits in the area. I have known her for almost 10 years and is on our RVA Thrive steering committee and has been committed to that work as well in the community. So I'll let her talk a little bit more about herself. We also have Aisha Bullard, who runs Real Chances. She's a nonprofit, runs the nonprofit Real Chances, as well as does development in the community, and that nonprofit is dedicated to supporting communities. Sorry, my computer just went crazy. So sorry. To supporting the underserved communities. And then we have Albert Walker from Richmond Memorial Health Foundation. He's the Director of Health and Equity and Community Engagement there. And so I'll let them talk a little bit more about themselves. We'll start with you, Ms. McQueen, and then we'll get into the questions.
All right, good evening. Can everyone hear me?
We can hear you.
All right, good. As Ms. Leah has said, my name is Louise McQueen, and I've been in the Richmond area now for a little over 50 years. I'm originally from North Carolina, but when I got married, I moved to Richmond because that's where my husband's from. But I've been in this community since 1970, and that's in the Belle Meade community of South Richmond. And since I have been here, I've been involved in trying to keep our community habitable and appealing. We're trying to make sure that everybody who comes in looks at how we have been trying to keep the Belle Meade community. We want to try to be welcoming, but we also want others who come in to help us with keeping it clean and inviting to others who come in. So I've enjoyed working in the Belle Meade community since I have been here, and I hope to continue.
Thank you, Ms. McQueen. Now we'll go over to Aisha.
Okay, get those at the same time. Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Thank you, Leah, for inviting me to be on the panel. I'm Aisha Bullard, wife and mom, attorney of 20 plus years, where I've always done business work. Out of my business work, I started doing real estate development. So I'm a real estate developer, but predominantly our properties are used to help people who've been living on the margins because of incarceration or mental health issues, poverty, homelessness. Real Chances is the name of the 501c3 that I started about 8 or 9 years ago now. We recently have come off a year where we stepped up and helped a lot during the pandemic with housing people who were unsheltered and coming out of Camp Cassie and supporting the work at the hotels. And so that program is called Roomie. A lot of people have heard of the work that Roomie's been doing over the past year and a half, helping people through the pandemic and providing shelter. And we're looking forward to continuing that work, supporting people who are experiencing homelessness and who just need help getting through. I think I'm privileged to be both on the side of being philanthropic, but also having founded one of the organizations that helps people. So I'm looking forward to participating in the discussion from both those perspectives.
I guess you want me to go next?
Yeah, go for it, Albert. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the invitation to come speak. Never And I'm so glad that you framed the conversation in terms of like rethink the way we think about philanthropy, because I guess I'm getting used to that idea. Never really thought of myself as a philanthropist, even while working in philanthropy. So it's just some new legs that I'm getting used to. Right now, I am director of health equity and community building at the Richmond Memorial Health Foundation. Just realized I've been working in Richmond literally over half my life. And so starting mostly in the East End, a nonprofit called Charity Family Life. And we were just really interested. My parents grew up in that neighborhood. And this was before it was sexy to be in Churchill. And so, you know, they were really just trying to address, like, they didn't have the language of root cause and moving upstream, but just providing academic tutoring and mentoring to families and cousins and neighbors in the East End. And from there, I did some work at BCU, did social determinants of health research, where I got a public health kind of crash course. Did some work in corporate healthcare, and now I'm at a health conversion foundation, a little bit different than many types of foundations, but I'm at a health conversion foundation. So really happy to be here today.
Thank you to all of our panelists for joining us today and having this conversation. And so we just have a few questions that we're going to kind of talk through, and then we're going to have time for questions and answer closer to the end of the conversation. So the first question I'll ask, and Aisha, I'll start with you on this question. So how have you historically understood Black philanthropy? How have you engaged with the term? What feelings and thoughts come up for you when you hear the term? I know I talked a little bit about kind of what I think about when I hear the term philanthropist. What's come up for you in that conversation?
Yeah, I don't think historically I had thought about Black philanthropy. Kind of what, like you alluded to, you typically think of the Rockefellers and more recently, Bill and Melinda Gates. I guess in the more near term, you've had people like Oprah Winfrey or, you know, the ultra rich. It seemed like space where only they would participate. And it's more recent where you've heard about Black people participating in that space. I never in a million years would have considered any of the ways that I use money to help or donate money or use time and talent to help as a part of philanthropy. So I appreciate the opportunity to rethink it, like Albert said too, and to reclaim it, because I know it's just foundationally a part of who I've always been and who my family's always been. It doesn't even feel like something that we should talk about outside of, you know, just our nature. So yeah, I'm happy to be a part of the club now, I guess, and can consider myself and my friends and family philanthropists joining the ranks of people who've been admired for that before, and being able to shine a light on it too.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. I think it's so true that we just kind of put those things that we naturally do in many of our communities aside and say, oh, that's just what we do, but it's not traditionally thought about giving back. Miss McQueen, tell me about what you thought about when you heard that question around what traditionally you've engaged with around philanthropy. And you're on mute, Miss McQueen. You have to come up here.
Okay, thank you. I never thought that much about Black philanthropy either. As a matter of fact, I wasn't even familiar with the term Black philanthropy. But I know that philanthropy for me meant giving of my finances, my time, as well as my services. And so I also looked up the word just to see what it meant. And it also stated that philanthropy means love of humans. And then I saw in one research paper that it said love of animals as well. But the act of giving was instilled in me when I was a young child, living in my parents' home. And we were taught, because, we had to go to Sunday school, we had to go to church, and the Sunday school teacher instilled it in us, the golden rule that is based on the scripture from Matthew 7, to do unto others as you will have them do unto you. So that's been with me all my life, because I watch how the others in my community, when I was young, how they gave freely. They didn't have a lot of money, but they had plenty of time. And so in that way, they were able to help each other. So that's been with me up until the present time.
Thank you so much for that contribution. I think that's true. Like we oftentimes have grown up in community, and part of being a part of community is making sure that everybody's okay. Because the only way where we're okay is if everybody else is okay.
That's right. That's right.
And a lot of times we don't think about that as traditionally as giving in that way, right? And so I think that our communal kind of perspective is really what puts us into that, like, loving of humans, right? Like loving of other people, and how that often signals back to many of us that golden rule that we were taught to do unto others. Albert, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, Ms. McQueen actually triggered a thought. Thank you for that. I was just thinking back when I needed some resources to go to Ghana. My grandparents, of course, gave me some, but they was like, go on over there, talk to that reverend over at Rising Mount Zion Baptist Church. He got a radio show. They always put young people on the radio. And as a freshman in college, he let me come on the radio show and just talk about my dreams about going to Ghana and raise money for me. And so it's definitely a value and ethic that's been in the Black community. I even think about Omega Psi Phi. I'm not in a fraternity, but those guys from Omega Psi Phi gave me a scholarship. And so I've been a recipient of Black philanthropy. And so those are some of the immediate thoughts that come to mind, as I think about, who I am as a person outside my role at a foundation. I still make it a priority to support organizations and folks that I see who are in the work, in the struggle, and doing the thing. So I'm glad to say I'm a contributor to Virginia Community Voice, and would like others to contribute to Virginia Community Voice. But also supporting other work in other cities. And so, I mean, there's a reentry, a Black-led, Black-run nonprofit in North Carolina that I'm supporting as well. So yeah, it's in our blood. It's in my blood. I just got to get comfortable with the fancy term.
Yeah, I mean, and I think in reclaiming things, we can define it how we, or like call it what we want. We don't have to use the traditional terms, but I think the idea of reclaiming the essence of what it is so important. So Albert, I'm going to stay with you, because you started to talk about the history and how your grandparents invested in you, and then the larger community invested in you. Talk to me about what you think about the present of Black philanthropy, and what does it feel like? How do you see yourself in that role? And then how do you see the larger Black community in that role of what's happening now with Black philanthropy?
I think conversations like this is super important. One, because nothing becomes remedial if you never got it before. And so having conversations about what this is all about, how we're contributing, is important, and to elevate it. Oftentimes we've been taught and instilled that when we give, you don't need to make a fuss about it. Mm-hmm. We don't. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, you don't make a fuss about it, because that's like a pride thing or an arrogance thing, and you're like, everybody don't need to know all that. Mm-hmm. But also, I mean, there's a two-sided coin to that. When we celebrate giving, and we celebrate folks not because of how much they give, but the spirit in which they give, mm-hmm. It does unleash a spirit inside a person, at least in me, I can't speak for everyone, about what it means to be generous. And so I think the state of Black philanthropy is strong. I think when we don't talk about it, we don't express it and show the many and varying different ways that it shows up, we may not be able to, we may not be as we've always been. We may not keep up these values and these principles that we've always contributed to. So, and so I think the biggest thing for me is to continue to talk about it, but also show our young children, just like my parents and grandparents did with me, about the importance of giving and how to do that in a way that makes, contribute.
I think that's so good to think about the legacy, like the legacy and passing that on and passing that down. Ms. McQueen, talk about a little bit about the legacy and the present and like where you see things happening, where you see things now.
Okay, well, I always looked at the Black community as always being a giving community in more ways than one. I've seen so much in my 79 years where Blacks have always been engaged in helping each other. And I deeply appreciate that. And I deeply appreciate, I'm thankful that I lived during that time where it was instilled in a lot of us. And over the years, I get in the mail quite frequently requests for donations, to send money to certain foundations. And then in the time that I lived, I've seen so many people suffer with cancer, so that when I continue to get a request from the American Cancer Society, I began to, send in every now and then a donation or contribution to them. But I want to take you back to that little town that I grew up in North Carolina, where I remember that when someone died, their remains weren't treated as they are today. The undertaker came and picked up the body and took it to the funeral home. But then when the body was ready, it was brought back to the house of the deceased. I see somebody else knows about that. And the neighbors all around, they came bringing food and drink, and they came to comfort and support the family members. Some came and brought the food. Others came and stayed all night with the family. And then when that group left, another group came and stayed with the family until the day of the funeral. So I remember that, how everybody pitched in to help this family who was going through something at this time. So I'm just blessed that I can look back. I'm old enough to look back and pull out some of those things that I still remember. And when you asked me to be on the panel, I thought about all those things that have been hidden away all these years.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I think I saw somewhere in the comments someone say like Black philanthropy is about community. It's about love of community, about love of who we are and supporting each other through those times. And I think that's so true, because as I said in the beginning, you see so many situations where as Black people, I know I've been in this situation, I know my family's been in this situation my whole life. We had somewhere for people to stay when they fell on hard times. We supported each other through those things, and that is love of humanity. That is love of people and in community. I think that's so beautiful. Aisha, what are your thoughts on the present and even looking back into the past and legacy?
Yeah, I think it's unfortunate that it's so hard to celebrate the things that we're talking about. Like Albert mentioned the kind of humility that I think we traditionally have about helping people. You just do it. It's not something that you put on Facebook or Instagram or brag about or, you know, get written up in an impact report for. So the humility piece is huge. And then the privacy piece, right? So we don't traditionally go around saying, oh, I got a big raise and now my tithe is going to be bigger, or look at how much money I gave or whatever. Like, traditionally, we're real low key about money, and no, you know, you're not supposed to talk about it. My husband especially comes from one of those families. And so if I'm celebrating something, he's like, why are you telling our business, you know? Right. So I think with those, the humility and the privacy that we've traditionally had around money, it's tough to celebrate in the way that the Bill and Melinda Gates of the world get celebrated. I really, again, am feeling in this very moment so appreciative that you've given us this platform and opportunity to celebrate. We've been doing some stuff in our community for a long time and helping a lot of people. And it puts me in a position where I have daughters 17, 11, and 9 to talk to them more about it, where historically we haven't talked about the ways that we've been able to help and the finances associated with it, especially. But just hearing now, I'm like, I need to talk to my baby so they know, you know, it's worthy of celebration. Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. This is such a good conversation. I feel like we're running out of time. So I'm gonna ask this this kind of last question is kind of one. So everyone, so I think, what do you think about the effects of traditional philanthropy, and how what kind of role does traditional philanthropy have now? And then more generally, what do we think about the future of Black philanthropy? Where are we going? So like, does traditional philanthropy have a role in the Black philanthropic community or in the Black philanthropic movement? And then what future do y'all see for Black philanthropy and where we're going? Because hearing you, Aisha, just talk about, like, we don't really talk about this stuff. So like, what should be different in the future as we think about where we need to go as a community? Aisha, I can stay with you on that, and then we'll go. I'm unmuted, so I don't have to fool around with that. So yeah, it would be wonderful if we could have something like a different scale or a different way to measure the contributions of Black giving. I know that you've done some work on that, and Sister Fun and Ujima have done some work around that, but traditional philanthropy looks at help through a different lens and doesn't necessarily embrace and appreciate all that we come to the table with. Yeah. So I don't know, question, do we need traditional philanthropy? Yes, but at the same time, we got so many dollars flowing through the Black community that could be used differently and that could help differently. Overwhelmingly, what I see is that traditional philanthropy doesn't know how to treat some of the contributions we make. They use the same metrics that have been used since the Rockefeller days. Yep. And I know, as the founder of a nonprofit and continued leader of a Black nonprofit, it makes it difficult for us to access traditional philanthropy. There's absolutely a role for traditional, but I look forward to to a time when there's different tools used to measure some of the work that we've been doing in the Black community. Absolutely. Thank you for that. That's wonderful. Albert, I'll go to you next, and then Ms. McQueen, you can bring up the rear.
I just want to say thank you, Aisha, for that thought. I mean, just to hear her say traditional philanthropy and access is that continues and remains to be a challenge. And I think that's a fair point to critique and to say. I mean, all of this is thorny, right? Because we have a thorny history and we have a thorny past. And I think the more we can be honest and open about the thorniness of this whole enterprise can help the enterprise. I think there has to be some humility in the role of traditional philanthropy to play that. Is there a role for it? Is there not a role? Future, I absolutely think there is a role. I think historically it's been both awesome and awful. Traditional philanthropy's role. I mean, we would not have, I should say we would not have, I would say traditional philanthropy played a critical role in one of the best Black institutions like Spelman College. So traditional philanthropy played a role in Spelman College and a lot of Black colleges and universities throughout the nation, and especially in the South. At the same time, philanthropy has not done well in communities. I mean, focused in on charity, not focusing on root causes, not sticking with an initiative long enough to kind of, traditional philanthropy gets fickle. And so we're off to the next bright and shiny thing. I think the future of philanthropy is that it's working on folks like me who've never been in it. Some old folks, I shouldn't say old folks, some older seasoned folks who are in philanthropy, who are teaching us what we need to do right. I mean, like, it takes intergenerational wisdom to kind of understand, to unpack, and to detangle some of this thorniness in these systems. And so that it's a continuum. So we need some griots in traditional Black, some Black griots in traditional Black philanthropy, in traditional philanthropy, who can tutor us who are in these roles. But we also need younger generations who are helping us to think deeply about the complexity moving forward. I think for the future, this whole enterprise is uber complex with many intersections. And one thing I know to be true, and the thing is that we were all made to be interdependent, and we really do all need each other. And so I don't know how that plays out. All I know is I'm looking for my kind of people in this work. And to try to replicate, just practices, but also humility and being able to get checked when I need to get checked. So that's it.
Thank you. Thank y'all both for that contribution. Ms. McQueen, what are your thoughts?
All right. Well, I like everything that I've heard so far, so it's been wonderful. But when I think about traditional philanthropy, I always felt that the Black community has always given freely in this respect. And I think of an incident where a couple of weeks ago, our pastor, Reverend Ralph Hodge, put on the Facebook page, we need some help right away for a grandmother who's trying to rear 7 grandchildren. And that's a lot.
That's a lot of kids.
That's a lot of kids. And immediately, there were over 20 responses from the congregation and non-members as well. And their response was beautiful. All they said was done. And, and that just sent, something wonderful to see all of those responses lined up on the Facebook page to let the pastor know, we heard you, pastor, and it's done. And so I just think that the Black community has always given freely, even if they didn't have the monetary gifts to give, they don't mind giving up their time and service. So I think that in that respect, we are doing pretty good. And then when I think about the role of traditional philanthropy in the future and what the future is of it, I say it's alive and well. It's alive and well. And it didn't just start happening in modern time. Remember Harriet Tubman?
Yep, that's right.
All right. Who gave of her services, risked her life. And please, let's don't forget about Frederick Douglass, who escaped and became an abolitionist. So they all risked their lives for not only Black people who were enslaved, but anybody who was enslaved. So I just think that, and I'd like to give you another little story about North Carolina. When I was a young girl and I was at home, a young mother, single mother, died unexpectedly and left 2 small kids.
Mm-hmm.
There were no close relatives. She had no siblings.
Mm-hmm.
The church got together, called a meeting to see who would adopt and raise these kids.
Mm-hmm.
And 2 seniors, family members, took those kids until their home and raised them up to adulthood.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
That's
I,
what
you
we
know,
do.
so I'm thankful that you asked me to be on the panel, because that helped me to recall
Yeah.
a whole lot of wonderful things that I've seen in 7 to 9 years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Thank you so much. That was a beautiful way to kind of end that portion, to think about the history, and to hear all of us kind of say, or all of you kind of say, like, we need to pull the legacy, and then we need to, you know, from our history, invest in the present, invest in our youth now, make sure they know the truth about who we are and where we're going, and then to hear you, Albert, say we all need each other for the future. Like, we all need to be together to figure out where the future lies. I think that's a good place to kind of end this portion. So y'all, I'm sorry, this is such a great conversation. We don't have as much time for questions as we hope to have, but we have a few minutes to take some questions for the panel, generally questions around where we are with philanthropy, with Black philanthropy, and what that looks like, and yeah, so if you could put the questions in the chat, and our VACV staff will help kind of manage that a little bit. But if you have some questions, or if there are questions that I missed going through the chat that y'all have, if staff can y'all help me see those.
All right.
Did we lose Aisha?
We may have.
Oh no, she's still there. She just now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I had some technical difficulties. Sorry.
That's okay. It's to be expected.
Well, that must mean we did a good job. No question.
I know, y'all. Listen, it sounds like we covered it.
You can't type that fast.
You can't type. You can ask it if you have something out loud to ask. You go for it.
So I'm curious about what the panelists think about greater investments from traditional philanthropists, and I'll give you an example of what I mean as a reparation for building their wealth. So today, the foundation community is charged with giving away 5% of its resource. And what about stacking another 5% on top of that and dedicating that money to Black-led organizations? I'm curious about what people think about that.
Oh, you're starting something, Mr. Boland. Albert, I'm going to go to you on that question.
Why did I think that Mr. Boland, as a mentor would do, put a young brother? I mean, honestly, Brother Boland, you know, I don't think that's not a fair, I should say, like an unfair suggestion, right? I think some people might say that that's not a fair question, but there are plenty of foundations who are raising their minimum thresholds because they're recognizing that in many cases, the need is often greater than what they can attribute. I think the way forward there is there's got to be a lot more education in traditional philanthropy about who's doing that well. In the same way, we don't hear a lot of stories about Black philanthropy. We don't hear a lot of stories within traditional philanthropy about those organizations who are raising the minimum thresholds. And so as foundations get more explicit about what they're doing and why, you know, I think that will help to encourage others to think about their stance in the work. But I think that's a totally fair critique. And I think moving forward, you know, I heard one person say, can we just get a time of it? And I was like, hey, I give a time. Why can't someone else give a time? And so it's a thought to consider. And but then there's a role that we have to do, those of us who are in philanthropy, to make that case. And so I appreciate the challenge, and I also appreciate the work you're putting on a young brother inside traditional philanthropy. So I appreciate it.
That's so great. I saw one other question from Kendra asking to, and we can do this super quickly, to speak to the role of Black philanthropy with social justice movements, both past and present and future. And it's also been touched on a little bit, but speaking to the role of the faith community with Black philanthropy. And you know, Ms. McQueen has spoken about it. I spoke about it a little bit in the beginning around the faith community. I think that is, the faith community, I feel like, mobilizes so quickly to show up, as you gave in your example, Ms. McQueen, how quickly the faith community will come together to say, we're going to support this person, we're going to support this family, we're going to step up to engage with this community that needs us, and how many nonprofits have been started through the Black church and through spaces where we're just like, there's a need in our community and we're going to come together on our own without oftentimes traditional philanthropic dollars invested in our nonprofits and in those efforts to meet the need in the community. Do any of y'all have any other thoughts about kind of the faith community or the history of social justice investment?
All right, Ms. Leah, this, I know this is a different kind of thing, but this is a time to put in a plug for RISK.
Listen, you know, I'm fine with putting in a plug for RISK always.
All right, which is an organization called Richmonders Involved to Strengthen Communities, to which I have belonged since 2003, brought to our church by our current pastor. An organization that is based or geared to assisting others who are in need or the marginalized community. And right now we are working on issues, gun violence, as well as affordable housing. And RISK is now beginning a new year with 2021 through 2022. We're gonna come up with some new issues. And we invite churches to become a member of RISK. And hopefully there will be someone here who might be interested in seeking out a little more about RISK. And if you are, we can certainly send you the information so that you can sit in on a meeting. Right now, we have about 21 churches in Richmond and in the surrounding area who are working with us on these issues. And we have been successful in several issues, but we're always looking for other churches or others to come in and join us. So
thank you for that plug, Ms. McQueen. I think it's a great plug, and I think it answers the question, Kendra, about the faith community and social justice issues, right? So RISK has been around for over 20 years doing that work in communities and bringing the faith community. And it's not just churches, it's synagogues, it's all kinds of mosques. Like, there are all kinds of the faith community coming together to hold up kind of and get to the root cause of those issues and say, like, this is where we can merge and find like that connection. And so I used to be the executive director of RISK, so I'm always a fan of promoting that work. But it's a good kind of merging between like social justice issues and how the faith community has come together to do that. And historically, we've seen faith communities, you know, the reason the March on Washington happened was because the faith community came together and sold chicken dinners out of the basements of churches and did all of these things to get people to that march and to move that process forward. And so I think that's a really good great place to transition. I want to respect your time. We're already 1 minute over. Please forgive us for that. But thank y'all so much for being a part of this conversation, for starting it. This is the first of many. We're going to continue to have conversations like this, and we'll let you know, because it feels really important to focus on these things, as Aisha said, to kind of get out of our traditional kind of like, private, or, we don't want to talk, even not to get out of humility, but to start to say, like, to celebrate the things that we know are important. So we'll go to the next slide, because I think this is one thing we really want y'all to see. We want y'all, this is August, it's Black Philanthropy Month. Invest in organizations that are doing philanthropic work in the community. Real Chances Incorporated is the organization that Aisha runs. Pretty Girls Incorporated, there's a link there. Inspire Me Foundation, it's one that Albert was talking about before. And if you don't know of or a Black-led organization that you can think about giving to, go to Give Black Richmond. There's a list of Black organizations to support there. And I will say, obviously, Virginia Community Voice is a place that you to support. We are looking to expand to 10 community voice amplifiers, which are people who invest in our work every month, and from $6 to whatever other amount you want. And we will please invest in the work that we're doing, but then it's also time investment, so it's either money or time. We value both of those equally, so please, if you're interested, go to our website, and all of that information on how to become a community voice amplifier is there. We're trying to get 10 more amplifiers, but before August 31st. So thank y'all so much for being a part of this conversation. Think about Black investment, think about Black philanthropy, and have these conversations with others in your family and in your life. Thank you to our panel, Ms. McQueen, Albert Walker, and Aisha Bullard. Y'all were wonderful. This was a wonderful conversation. Y'all have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you so much.
You too. Thank you.